tall, gangly thing?
Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by one of the technical designers for Teamfight Tactics. It is Chloe Wright. Chloe, thank you so much for being here. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Chloe, for anyone who may not know all that much about you, why don't you just go ahead first and just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Like you said, I'm a tech designer on TFT. I play a lot of Summoner's Rift, and I wasn't prepared to say things about myself. I'm prepared to say things about Silco.
How long have you been at Riot?
I've been at Riot for about 3 years. I actually joined right before TFT, as in literally the day before TFT went to PBE. And I was onboarding onto what was then kind of the TFT team. So it was like, hey, welcome to Riot. I gotta go. I'm very busy. Have fun here. Bye.
Wow, so you might have actually been the first new hire to go directly to TFT.
Yeah, although I was hired onto the TFT team, since the TFT team, like I said, did not have time to onboard this new hire. I wound up working on a system that Summoner's Rift uses for streamers that lets you hit the tab button to see the scoreboard on Twitch. You can also use it for other things, like your headphones can use it to light up when you get a pentakill or whatever. But yeah, I was the first new hire, I think, onto TFT.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's kind of talk about the role that you've had. Like you said, you are a technical designer. I have no idea what that means. I'm sure a lot of people don't quite know what that means. So can you kind of break down what a tech designer does? And also, can you kind of let us know like where we might have seen your work in TFT?
Yeah, so I didn't start out as a tech designer on TFT. I started out as an engineer. And originally, I was going to not say that because I didn't want to confuse the point. But I think this is interesting for people who potentially want to enter the industry to know about this path. A technical designer is somebody who has expertise in engineering tech and design, game design. Riot Rainboom is the first person who comes to my mind, Raina Sweet, as a tech designer at Riot. Other companies have tech designers, and they always function a little bit differently. Riot has very few tech designers relative to other designers. And 5 of them are on TFT. And I get asked a lot, what do tech designers do? And I've worked very hard on trying to get a really good answer to that question, and it's not an easy one to give a short and sweet answer to, but I think the best summary is a tech designer is someone with high skill in both engineering and design, and we are doing our best work when we are leveraging both skills. And some of that means running communication between non-technical designers and engineers. Some of that means when we're papering out our idea for what a new set structure is going to be, thinking about, is there a new tool we could make that could make this process easier? Or, is there something that I know our technical systems allow for that we haven't leveraged yet and could be a new trait? It doesn't always mean doing something like a really complicated script implementation that leverages my knowledge of data structures, but it can. My work shows up in a lot of different places as a designer and on the technical side. On the technical side, a lot of the stuff I've done has been implementing things like armories, augments, UI things. One fun little tidbit that is sort of a secret piece of functionality. You might know that when you hover a trait on your board, when you hover the trait either over on the left-hand side of the screen or from a unit's tooltip card, it plays a glowing highlight under that champion on the board. What you might almost certainly not know is that that does also work on the carousel. So when you're new to a set and you're looking at the carousel and you're trying to see, man, do any of those higher cost champions that are appearing on the carousel match what I'm looking for? Am I running a trait that includes one of these champions? There is a way to check.
Wait, so explain that functionality one more time for me. You're saying, because you're saying if I'm at the carousel, what is the secret I need to do? What is the action to actually find out the synergy?
You know, you can't see all of their traits, but you can see your trait tracker over on the left-hand side. I'm guessing the video is going to get mirrored over, so it's going to look like I'm gesturing to the right, which is going to be confusing and good. But it shows your traits over on the left-hand side, and it keeps showing that on the carousel. And if you hover one of the traits, the icon of the trait that brings up the tooltip, when it displays the tooltip, it also glows under the champions that match it. It's a pretty subtle glow.
Oh my gosh, I get it. So if you hover the trait you're looking for while on carousel, the carousel units themselves will glow below them to indicate that they are within that synergy or origin, or the class or origin that you're looking at. Wow.
It works on the board too, but it can be really helpful on the carousel where you actually can't inspect the champion at all. So
that's amazing.
My secret tip.
Wow, yeah. So you're like you said, a game designer that has kind of the infrastructure to be able to build from the ground up. That's really, really fascinating. One of the things that obviously we're going to talk about in this interview is that on top of being tech designer in TFT, and mainly because of that, you were one of the leads in the development of Silco, the antagonist from Arcane, everybody's favorite crime lord who's now joined the TFT army. And I want to kind of hear the story of this. How Silco came to TFT. Was Silco planned before the release of Arcane? Was Silco added because of the response to it? What did that whole story and timeline look like?
Yeah, so we do all of the development of Set 6, Set 6.0, right? Linda and Giovanni are working on champs and traits. I was working on Augments in the armory, getting the hex core to work. Everything's a little bit on fire. We get everything out the door. 6.0 is awesome. Arcane is awesome. We're all like, wow, we just did all that really hard work. It's time to relax a little. What can we do to have a relatively easy Set 6.5 process? And August Browning comes over to Linda and it's like, wouldn't it be cool if Silco was a champion, and then walks away? And Linda and I are kind of like, haha, yeah, wouldn't that be cool? Wait. Would it? And we're at first like, okay, how can we smuggle Silco into TFT? We were like, okay, we find a Twisted Fate character model and we get Art to take off its hat, and we maybe have them recolor it some and give him face scar. We use the really cool splash from Arcane and then Silco, right? That could be cool.
Sure.
And we started planning around doing that, and we brought this to our artists, and they were like, guys, no. We can do this for real and much better than you're imagining. So then we started the process of getting assets and stuff from Arcane and, getting him into the set. But it was really kind of a sudden thing. But it was just such a good idea that we had to do it. Once we realized it was possible, we were not going to pass it up.
Now, obviously, when you're building units in TFT, traditionally you're working off of the kits already presented in League of Legends. Because Silco is not an existing league champ, I assume that there was a certain level of freedom in that. And actually, I have a community question here from Nick CT16 who wanted to ask what the challenges and opportunities were that presented themselves in having that freedom that you had in developing Silco.
Yeah, so this comes in both as a game designer designing his kit, and also I want to talk about what it meant for him, art and appearance wise, of that Silco is this really deep, brooding, intimidating, and like sympathetic in many ways villain in Arcane, and it's because of so much of like how he moves, how he holds himself, his facial expressions. That's not going to work in TFT. You can't look at his facial expressions in the middle of a fight to get an idea of, oh, this man is so cool and interesting. So part of it was the art team, one, needed to take the model from Arcane, which is, I think, about 4 billion polygons just for his face. Something we could actually load onto everybody's client and then have do stuff. But then adding some stuff to Silco, some props and things that helped convey the character of Silco in ways that are in the show conveyed through his actions and movements. Like there are all those intimidating moments with him like holding the vials and stuff and inspecting them and thinking about them. So we gave him those vials so that you'd see them and think of those moments. But we don't actually have to have him sit there brooding in a way that would be not noticeable in the middle of a fight. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and kind of bouncing off of this idea of like the source material being wider and broader than traditionally what you'd have available, I kind of want to know, as someone who watched Arcane and then kind of built Silco off of what you had already seen, was there a certain scene or moment in Arcane that informed how you went about building his kit?
Yeah, the scene that I think back on is, I think it's in episode 2. Silco says to Singed that he's looking at this purple vial like I'm talking about. And he says, "Will he live?" And Singed says, "Long enough." And that's really what his ability is this person will live for a limited amount of time, but hopefully is long enough for them to do some serious damage. Exactly like Silco envisioned.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And yeah, and for anyone who's watching who doesn't know, so Silco's ability in the new TFT set, essentially he provides a concoction to one of his allied units who then goes crazy, gets CC immunity, attack speed, does an insane amount of damage, and after a period of time dies and does magic damage to the enemy team. One thing I wanted to ask you though, Chloe, is were there other variations or iterations of Silco's kit that didn't make it to live that you can maybe leak a little bit?
Yeah, we did some really big iterations on Silco's kit. So yeah, the game design challenge here was it was hard to know where to start. We were like, we kind of want it to be death related. We don't want it to feel like this is a safe thing. But how do we convey that right? And the way it actually started was essentially as a really different feeling, differently themed version of Zillion, where he cast the ability and then waited and then the buff activated on them. They had it there, but it wasn't doing anything until they died. And then they lived very briefly again, did some damage, and died. The other thing in that iteration was that his trait, Mastermind, was a shroud-shaped thing, but rather than delaying enemy casts, it made ally casts faster by giving them starting mana. Which what he does now on live is that the 2 units standing directly in front of him get starting mana. And then the reason that didn't work is because although that version of his kit didn't kill the enemy unit in the same way that it does now, which would help players not feel like they were losing out on as much. It was also not immediate very confusing. It was off theme, hard to track what was going on. And doing it that way meant we couldn't put as much power into the units benefiting from the buff. And making it a little bit more of a risk reward, a will they live long enough, is what really sells it as Silco's ability and makes it possible to use really well. But after that, actually, that iteration, because it got kind of a this is whatever response in playtest, and we needed to lock Silco's abilities in as fast as possible because Art needed to do a lot of work, and we couldn't be like, hey guys, 2 weeks before we hit PvE, we've got like a ton of work for you to do on the Premier Champion in the set. Do you mind? So I iterated really fast to something really different, which was the Mastermind trait now kept Silco from auto-attacking, and instead he gained mana for each unit that was alive on his team.
Okay.
Each second. And he would like do this every second or something. And then his ability then was kind of, because we wanted more of a punchy output. And I was like, okay, let's make his ability most of the time do something kind of mediocre, of give some, let's say, bonus damage and attack speed. But then, if he has no allies left to cast it on, he summons a monstrosity, by which I mean Scion, who does a ton of damage and whose size scales with his AP. So you get to summon a massive monstrosity if you itemize him in a weird way. And that didn't work because it was confusing. The trait and the ability were kind of asking you to do opposite things. The trait was saying, have lots of living allies. And the ability was saying, don't have too many living allies so you can get this sweet-ass abomination in. And even if you were playing it well, most people could only figure out how to play around that to get the abomination summoned, like, every few rounds. And like really what it was doing was it was like a worse version of asking you to play around Kale. And it was worse because, again, it was confusing. But the really good thing about that was, Silco made a big thing. I like that big thing. So that actually kind of did survive into the final iteration of that. Now we were like, okay, we know what was good about the first couple of things. People really liked actually the first Mastermind trait. And even though him not auto-attacking kind of fits his character, playing around this starting mana thing feels really good. And it's awesome that it works so well with Jinx. And then we can make the emotional payoff of this like death mechanic better by making it immediate. And we can make them big. We can make them a big unit for 8 seconds. Sorry, I don't know if I gave too long of an answer there.
That's incredible. No, it is amazing to see the trajectory that you actually took. And just so I understand, like how long of a timeline would you say you actually went from your first iterations to locking in abilities for the art team?
First iteration got play tested. And then I totally reworked him to the second iteration in probably less than a week, like 3 or 4 days.
Oh, wow.
Because like we couldn't afford to just let him sit. And then the final iteration, the third iteration, which J-Bach actually put together the third iteration, shout out to Static, took another like couple of days. It was a really, really short turnaround.
This was a sprint.
The reason I had to hand it off to J-Bach was because I was like, I'm out for a couple days. We don't have time to wait until I'm back. But because we knew that was coming, we were like coordinating on everything and able to loop everyone together So.
Wow. Yeah, it really is amazing to see how quickly and efficiently this actually did come together. And I mean, you guys, like we've said multiple times already, your team, you guys have kind of broken this mold of only including champions from League of Legends now included in TFT. And so I kind of want to know, this actually going into a community question from at TFT Ren, who wanted to ask if we can expect or hope to see future non-champions in TFT. Has including Silco broken the expectation of what we might see in the future?
Right now, we don't have any plans for it. But doing Silco didn't go catastrophically wrong. We got him out, and he seems to have been successful. So it's I wouldn't guess that it's something we'll avoid in the future either.
Let me bounce off of that a little bit. So in the development of TFT unit, are there times where your team has an idea for a kit and you all think it would be amazing if we had a unit do X? It would fit the theme, would work really well with the interactions we already have on the board, but we don't have a champion who can do that. Is that something you guys have already run into in the past?
Normally, the direction that we go in most of the time, we rarely have a specific mechanic that we can't fit to something. Though sometimes there's an archetype that we can't get a skin to fit into. Like we can't get a tank into, I think it was Spirit in 4.5, was like, there's just not a skin for a tank that looks like Spirit enough that we can add to solve the Spirit doesn't have a frontline problem. We wound up moving Diana into Spirit for that reason. That was why she stayed, even though Moonlight left. But the one time I can think of where we went from a more specific mechanic we wanted in an ability to, well, okay, where do we put this, was I had talked to Mort about potentially reusing old abilities, reprinting essentially old abilities on new champions, just by giving them a little bit of a twist that made them fit that champion better, refreshing them some, but essentially taking the inspiration from an old ability. And Mort was like, yeah, okay, I mean, that's a decent idea, whatever. If you want to do that, fine. And I was like, okay, but I don't really know where to do that, who to do it with. And Mort came back a few days later and was like, you should do that with Vi. Vi is the person. I want to see, not Vi. He said, you should do that with Riven. Set 4 Riven. Was really good, had a really unique kit that ended up with really unique itemization that we don't see very much. So if you can figure out how to get Riven in, let me know. And that was actually what inspired moving Vi up to a 4-cost and turning sisters into rivals, or was part of what inspired it, right? Because obviously Arcane also inspired it. But thinking, what is the cool Vi twist on that Riven pattern, just because it felt like something that, like, oh, we can make that work with Vi. I think it turned out really well. I'm really proud of the Vi update for the mid set.
Now, we've talked a lot about Silco up to this point. We're talking about Vi right now, but Neon Knights is full of brand new things across the board. I mean, obviously, there's augments, there's a return of some of the previous set mechanics that we're kind of seeing in, some subtle ways, some very obvious ways. I just kind of want to know, as someone who's been so intimately working on this set, what are you most excited for in Neon Knights?
I really do think one of the things that I am most excited about is Vi. Certainly she's one of the things I'm most proud of. But probably the single thing I'm most excited about is Debonair. I really liked Chosen. And the thing I liked about it really was I liked kind of the new inspiration, the lead it could give me for what I was going to do. So like seeing Chosen Annie in my shop would make me think like I'm solo frontline Annie Arcanist. That's what this game is. Or when you're kind of lost in the middle of your build and you see, VIP Draven, you can be like, all right, I can make VIP Draven work. In a way that other traits only give you that like unique pivot opportunity when you see when you happen to notice wow, I've got 3 Revenant champions in my shop right now. I guess I should pivot to Revenant. But this is a much clearer moment for that. I really like letting the game kind of guide my decisions. If I get a cool trait augment in the minion rounds, I always am like, all right, we're going whatever that is, even if I don't have the units for it yet. That way I get to play something different every game. So having something that inspires you to do something different, to play a different game than you would the last time, instead of forcing Chemtechs over and over. I love it.
Chloe's calling me out directly with that statement, by the way. Let's just make that clear.
There's no shame in forcing Chemtechs over and over, I promise. I just also want to do other stuff.
Now let's I want to talk about expectations, because it feels like since the release of Set 6, with the success of Arcane, the booming player base that has come to TFT, everybody's expectations, at least from a player base standpoint, I feel like were shattered. Nobody really expected TFT to pop off like it has in the last couple of months. And TFT changes all the time. The set is constantly changing. There are new updates. And I just kind of want to know, with the incredible bar that your team has set in TFT, is there ever this concern about expectations that maybe you've set the bar too high? Can you repeat that success again?
There's an anxiety when a new set is coming out. I think is a little different from, so when SR produces a new champion, they are adding a new champion. When we make a new set, we are taking something away first. And we really, really don't want to give you back something that you don't like as much. And I'm not going to say that's never happened to any individual player, right? But our goal is that it never happens, even if, we aren't perfect. And so that anxiety definitely exists. But the fact that we have all of the reason Set 6 was so good wasn't just it was based on Arcane, which was sick as fuck. Of course it was good. That wasn't a guarantee. It was, we'd learned so much from making the previous sets. We'd gotten better at figuring out what makes a set exciting. We knew, okay, Fates was really, really cool. What did people really like about Fates? And the answer was they presented them with unique opportunities with the Chosen that they got. Okay, well, we can make those unique opportunities. And that, Augments does that, and it does that really well. We have old champions to draw from and use as reprints that we can tweak. We really are our past successes, yes, they're really big shoes to fill, but we're also kind of standing a stair up on the staircase. Sure. Because of it. It gives us a head start.
Now, I do have one other community question from you. This one is actually coming from Jirachi, from @Jirachi TFT, who wanted to know how you feel about the state of queer and trans representation in TFT, both in the player base and then the game, and assuming the dev team itself. And do you feel like there's anything more that the dev team could be doing to help increase visibility of that subset of the community?
I have appeared in 3 of Mort's set update videos. In every single one of those videos, Mort has gendered me correctly. Mort has gendered me as they, them. In the first 2 videos, there was no response to that happening at all in the comments. Some people I think picked up on Mort doing that, and then in turn gendered me as they, them. Lots of people gendered me as she or her. But nobody was being transphobic towards me in the comments. In the video I appeared in recently after the Zon Cup, there were a ton of transphobic comments directed at me, and that Mort spent a fair amount of time out of his busy day, where his job is not being a comms person or moderating terrible YouTube comments. Mort spent a lot of time deleting some of the especially bad comments there. And I really think that that was because that, like, transphobia begets more transphobia. And that what TFT needs to do is, and the TFT community as a whole, the TFT dev team needs to do, is to keep saying that's not okay. And to keep doing things like suggesting that I, their non-binary designer, get up and have a conversation with Mort or do an interview with you, and support us through that, to support you, Jirachi, through that, as if I'm talking to them right now. But, you know, I don't know what all, like, really concrete actions exactly we should be taking. I'd have to spend a lot more time thinking about what that looks like. But what I can say my team did for me behind the scenes in the past day was, I talked to a few team members who took some time out of their day to help me process through those comments on Mort's video so that I could be ready to do this. Which obviously isn't an action that we are taking publicly as a dev team to support queer, trans, non-binary creators. It's not a company action, and I do want to see us do more of that. And I hope that we will.
Chloe, I know obviously the last question there is much heavier than the content of this interview otherwise, but I do want to just say I appreciate the transparency and the honesty and the thoughts, and most of all, I would just say the willingness to, you know, be a figure who's willing to talk about these things, because I can at least speak for me that it is hard for a lot of us to kind of understand what our role should be apart from just being supportive. And I think that the biggest thing we're kind of taking out of all of this is that the best way to get rid of hate is to be active in getting rid of hate and speaking out against it. And I can at least say for me, it's amazing to see the TFT team speaking out on Twitter, appearing on broadcast or appearing on content and saying, we're aware of it, we're here to help. And so I know that it was much heavier than everything else I asked you. So I just wanted to say thank you for, you know, that addition to this interview. And with that though, Chloe, that actually is everything that I have for you. So thank you so much. I mean, this has been an incredibly insightful into the process of development of Silco, the things you have accomplished in TFT over the last couple of years, and many other things that we were able to discuss. Before we go though, I do want to ask, was there anything you wanted to shout out or talk about before we go?
There's always a question like that at the end of everything I've ever done, and I never have an answer. No.
Well, for everyone watching this interview all the way through, thank you so much for watching this. Really appreciate your support. Chloe, again, thank you so much for joining me. It was a blast getting to talk to you. For everyone watching, for more TFT coverage and content, make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.